Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to get some insight into a part of Milford's education that we don't talk much about. We spend a lot of time talking about Milford High and Woodland and Brookside, but we don't talk about BVT. And a lot of us don't understand what BVT offers and how successful BVT has been and the kids who go to BVT have been. And right now, we have an inflection point where we have a first superintendent in 3 decades.
That's right.
Why don't we start with an introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Al. Anthony Steele, and I have just taken on the role of Superintendent Director at BVT on July 1st. And to your point, Al, first time that's happened in 31 years with Dr. Fitzpatrick retiring, and quite honored to take on that role and that challenge.
But you've been there almost as long as Dr. Fitz.
Yes, it's amazing how the years roll by, but my 29th year at BVT started as an English teacher there in 1997, and then kind of quickly moved up through the ranks there. When I was 26, I became the assistant principal and academic director. The last 13 years I've served as the assistant superintendent principal. So, yeah, 3 decades with Doc, and it's my home.
Fundamental question. Before we ask who are you, what is BVT? What's the mission?
I would say that the mission hasn't changed much, if at all, since 1964. The mission has always been to prepare kids for a career that they're passionate about. So the first step is to help them find something that they're passionate about. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. Help them find it, and then, give them the skills that they need to be successful in that, whether they go directly into the trade or their mission carries them on to take more education, whatever that means. Could be some trade school, could even be just training programs all the way up to 4-year school, whatever it may be. But we really try to connect students with their passion, find it, and be successful at it. And at the same time, we also have to be mindful of their character, their employability, their professionalism, and try and teach them those values as well. It really goes hand in hand with a successful career.
Well, back when I was in high school, there was 8th grade where you decided, did you want to go on a college track and go to Milford High, or did you want to go in the trades and go to BVT? Seems like that's changed a bit now.
Yeah, that has changed. I think back, even in my time, but prior to my time in the 60s, maybe simpler division in that regard. You could learn a trade, you could go in that trade, climb that ladder in whatever that field was, and have a very successful, happy, lucrative life. What we've seen more in recent times has been the necessity for continuing your education. Again, it doesn't have to be a full-blown 2-year degree or 4-year degree, but continuing education seems to be an inevitability in almost all the trades. So, for example, at Valley Tech, we have 18 programs. About half of them, a student could take that are 2,000 hours, 4 years of training, go into that field, and could ascend, right? Climb the ranks and have a great career in that. The other half, it's actually more like 60% of them or so, all of them could go in and have an entry-level position. But if you want to climb the ladder in that field, you will need to pursue more training, more education. I'll give you an example with dental assisting, for example. You leave Valley Tech with your Danby cert, so you could go out and be a certified dental assistant. You could also work in a dental office, more on the administrative side, billing side. But if you want to take that next step, it's the next rung is hygienist, and you have to go to school for that. That's fine. You could start as the dental assistant or the office manager. You could finish your career there. But if you want to ascend, then more school is required now. Same thing with, say, a health services, right? You could go out, you graduate with your CNA, you could be a home health aide, you could be a CNA in any care center. But obviously, if you want to keep going up, climbing the rungs, at some point you're going to need to go back to school. So those types of scenarios play out in about 60% of our, programs. It's usually your construction trades, say welding, auto tech, things like that. You could leave Valley Tech with your high school diploma, have a very nice, career and ascend. So that's what's changed. And that's the schools responded to it. But let me say, from a society standpoint, it's not the good old days anymore.
Well, some of the things that come up is I just realized that my old alma mater is close to breaking the $100,000 a year mark.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, BC, Holy Cross, it's probably both the same.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I think a lot of people are starting to think, if I got to put $400,000 into a college career, there's a lot of trades that could provide a pretty solid income and a career path.
Absolutely.
Do you see more kids going towards the trades?
I do. I think we've hit an inflection point. You can see it at Valley Tech. I think at a high water mark, we had about 90% of our kids going on to pursue education rather than going directly into the trade. That's come down quite a bit. We're probably closer to about 75% now, and that's been a pretty rapid drop. So what you're seeing, I call it, my term, the referendum on higher ed. And, what's happening there is a number of things coming together at once. So you mentioned extremely high, tuition costs. I call it the student loan crisis, right? You have young people going out, pursuing a college degree, then potentially not even using that degree, but you still keep all of the financial debt.
Still got the debt.
You still got the debt, right? And that's probably your most tragic scenario right there. But the employers are also recognizing that the degree, the piece of paper itself, does not necessarily represent what they're looking for in a skill set in their employees and their workers. So, in addition to that, you have, I don't know if you've heard of it, but the skills-based hiring movement. So you have employers now essentially eliminating the college degree requirement for a lot of jobs. Governor Healy actually did that about a year ago in the state. I believe about 90% of the state jobs, they removed the college requirement from it. And that's in recognition of the skills-based hiring movement. We're going to hire you out based on the skills that you have rather than the paper the credentials you got on the wall, right? So all of that is well in motion, and I think it's all working off different aspects of it, combining into that. And this is part of what's driving, students making a decision. It's also parents making that decision, right? I could tell you, I had some different ideas than perhaps my parents did at one point in time, and, you got to come to a consensus there. But you're definitely seeing more students and parents that are willing to pursue going directly to work. That's not terminal. If you wanted to go on and get education later, you could do that, right? Pursue it when perhaps you are more certain about what you want to do, more pointed. You now narrowed down a skill set that you're seeking. And I think that's become quite evident. One thing that's I'll say incomplete with the skills-based hiring movement is that even very recent data, and I watch this closely, you will still have about 60% higher earnings in your lifetime with the paper than if you don't have the paper. And to me, the mission will be complete, the movement will be complete when employers actually pay similarly, right? So you might not have the paper, I got the degree, right? So great, we're both eligible to be the new guy to water the plants here. But I don't know if the boss he's probably gonna pay me more than you because you don't have the paper. So that part is still real. And what I see happen is that it's almost a fear factor, right?
Yeah.
It's, oh my gosh, imagine you're a parent. I don't know. I'm going to send little Al to college because I see this happening. But I don't want to take the chance. Just go, right? And they're not quite there yet, where they're willing to make that leap of faith, if you will.
Yeah, but that's when college was, I hate to say, affordable.
Yeah,
I mean,
agree.
when I graduated, a lot of us, we graduated with $32.80 in our pocket. But we didn't know anything.
That's right.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
Holy Cross, BC back then was $6,000 all in for the year.
Yeah, yeah.
I was amazed at my parents because my mother worked at Draper as a drill press operator, making a whopping $11,000 a year. My father made the big bucks. He was at General Motors at $18,000.
Yep, yep.
And
It was
somehow
probably
they
good money
saved,
back then.
but they saved enough money that they paid my college. So I graduated not owing anybody. I see these kids graduating with $100,000, $150,000 in debt.
Yeah, more than I paid for my first house.
But that's the key.
Yeah,
Well, you graduate, you want to get a house, you want to get a car, but if you're already paying $1,500, $2,000 a month in student loans, how do these kids start?
you don't. You don't. It's an impossible math scenario. So one of the things we do with the kids at Valley Tech is that we have a 4-year course called Career Enrichment, right? And it teaches them all aspects of, professionalism, resume building, job seeking. They do home budgets, personal finance, all those things are combined. One, core concept that's in it is that they have to do career planning. Now we've stepped up our curriculum in that area. It used to be doing the math of whether or not you wanted to, go pursue a degree. Now it's more like doing the calculus of whether or not it's worth it to get a degree. And there's a number of factors there. So we have them, looking at not just a simple, do I go to school or do I go to work, but play out the scenarios. What school, right? Boston College, Holy Cross, that's one thing. You could probably do a lot better at a state school. You could even do a lot better at a community college. So you see a much smarter, we're trying to build a much smarter consumer here that has looked at those elements, but then look at your earnings potential, right? And to your point, dollar saved is a dollar earned. So do those projections. If you left Valley Tech earning, right, and by the time you get out of school, by the time you pay off said loans, and let's say you made a smart choice here with financially and took the lesser expensive degree, how long is it going to take you to catch up? Where is the intercept of that? And ultimately making sure it's something that is applicable and you need it. So part of the problem with the college crisis that we're seeing in this country is that students are pursuing degrees that don't necessarily have a very,
Marketability.
you got it, or opportunity.
Well, I remember
Mm-hmm.
once a year at school, they'd bring us together and put us at all different tables, chemistry, dental, all the pieces. And one girl came up and said, well, I'm graduating in 3 months, and I'm not sure what I should do. And I said, well, what's your degree? And she said, religious studies. I said, go get a PhD.
Yeah.
And she said, why? I said, because I don't know what you do with a religious studies degree, except teach. And if you want to teach at a college, you're going to need a PhD.
Yeah.
But you sit
Sure.
there and say, back then she had spent $250,000, and there's not a lot of markets available for religious studies majors.
You're absolutely right. And so for all of these things, society here is starting to wake up and realize that this needs to be a much more sophisticated calculation, right? And you're seeing it. And I'm really happy to see it. So, these kids that we have at BVT, by the time they complete all of their training, they have industry-recognized credentials in their pocket. So they got all these certs, right? The more the better, and we get them as many as we can. The demand is there, so the jobs are there. And it's more or less, trying to give them that confidence, and the parents, frankly, the confidence that this is okay, that this is actually a smart move these days, right? And do the math, do the calculus.
Well, I mean,
right?
we grew up and everybody's, you got to be a doctor, you got to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I sit there and say, what happens if I don't want to be?
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to be a chemist. I volunteered over at the hospital, and after 6 months said, I want no part of this. You know, I don't
Yeah,
care what
yeah.
they make. And now, to me, right now, especially primary care physicians, they work way too hard for not enough money.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the nice things about, students that come through BVT. About 60% of them stick with their trade, right? The other 40% learned what they didn't want to do. And sometimes, that's just as valuable. But there's a lot of kids that go into, for example, healthcare, and then they get out there and do clinical, and they've seen some things, Al.
I was
say,
so
"Wow,
happy
this-"
to be exposed in the emergency room. And I mean, I was a high school student, so I was cleaning bedpans and
Yep.
but the emotional drain convinced me this is not what I want ever. I'm glad I found out early. Like when we went to freshman year, there were 12 chemistry students, pure chemistry.
Yep.
By junior year, there was 50 because at that point, the pre-meds who weren't going to make it had to pick something, and a lot of them
Oh,
picked
yeah, they drop down to that. Yeah.
But, you sit there and you say one of the biggest things is what you're saying, learning what you don't want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, that's part of, they go back to college crisis. About 40% of kids that wind up pursuing a degree wind up in that scenario, right? And so now you're invested. You got to pay that loan back, right? And you're kind of pushed into a career that, I said at Valley Tech, we try to help kids find their passion, something that they really like to do. Well, I think that happens more than you like to think,
We'll go through some of the accomplishments of Valley Tech, but the one black eye that we hear of all the time, the one criticism of Valley Tech is, I can't get in.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing, because I've always said, people like my father, he came to this country from Portugal, put him in an organic chemistry class,
Not happening.
that dog don't hunt.
Right.
But give the man a tool. He was an artist, what he
Yeah.
could do with his hands. But I sit there and say, could he ever get into Valley Tech? How do I apply to Valley Tech?
So you're asking me now?
Yeah.
Well, we're actually right on the cusp of entering the new lottery. So the state went statewide this fall. We will be, all Voc Tech schools in the state are doing the new statewide lottery admissions.
What does that mean?
So this has been a 10-year conversation. Conversation, that's a nice word for debate, right? 10 years back and forth with all kinds of stakeholders, public hearings, the whole 9 yards on the pros and cons, the ups, the downs of how does a student get into a Voc school. Valley Tech has the one of two top longest waiting lists in the state. It's us and Essex Aggie. But virtually all of the career tech schools, there's 26 of them, like Valley Tech, have pretty long waiting lists to get in. So there's been a long-standing conversation, 10 years, on the best way. What's the fairest way to do that? And that just culminated this past spring with the Board of Education ultimately deciding to go to a statewide lottery system. So they published guidelines for not only all 26 Voc Tech schools, but any school that has a Chapter 74 Voc program or comprehensive schools that have 5 or more.
And Chapter 74 is the trades.
That's the trades, right? That's the official designation for a Massachusetts vocational program. Essentially, minimum of 900 hours, credential requirements, teaching credential.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt, but when you say Chapter 74,
it rolls
a lot
off
of
the
people
tongue.
are like,
whatever he said, right? And so now there is statewide lottery system whereby if you apply, you'll have one lottery ticket, If you've had less than 27 absences in the last 270 days, you'll have 2 draws in the lottery. It's like Powerball, right? How many tickets do you usually buy, right? You can get up to 4. If you do not have a felony or a expulsion under Chapter 37H, you get a 3rd ticket.
A felony?
Yes, sir.
These are high school kids and we're worried about felonies?
No, these are 8th graders, Al. So as long as you don't have a felony or an expulsion, you'll get a third ticket. And then the last opportunity for an extra ticket is what's called awareness. So if you've come to an open house or things like that. So let's kind of flip that. Every applicant's probably going to have 4 tickets because those are fairly low bars, right?
Yeah.
And then we will go through a process. I don't know if we want to get into it here. If there's some more mechanics of it, but Milford will have an apportionment of seats based on how big Milford is compared to the
Is that
the other
how
towns.
it's divvied out?
That's how it will be.
Oh,
That was not how it was previously.
because
right?
we used to have the discussion with Dr. Fitz
Yeah.
to say, we're going to monitor increases in contribution every year.
Yes.
But, Dr. Fitz, if you can take more Milford kids,
Yeah.
don't worry about the money.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Milford will come up with the money. If you come back and say, we're adding 3 kids, it's 30 grand more.
Right. Yeah. Well, just this past year, we it went up. You guys went up quite a bit, right?
And we were happy to do it because you did it by kids.
I remember. I didn't forget. How's that? So here's the thing. Trying to do this fairly, right? So we've never had what you would call apportionment or quotas, right?
You don't reserve
Milford's
spots.
got this many seats. Mendon's got this many. Upton's got that many. It was all based just on the old Department of Ed approved system. So when I looked at it in terms of implementing this lottery, you have. Well, let me start here. So what's the fairest way to determine how many seats should Milford have? Right?
You start with what? 3, how many in a class?
315.
315 divided by,
So it's 1,260 kids at the school, so 315 each class. So we have towns that, you got Milford, one of our largest, and you have Millville, right, one of our smallest. And, what's the fair way to do this? So what I looked at was the 8th grade populations in each of those towns. How many 8th graders does Milford have? How many 8th graders does Millville have? And divide, take your numerator from Milford, divided by how many 8th graders are there in all 13 towns, and you get a proportion, right? So that's a starting point. Not all towns are, I call that starting point your foundation target or your foundation ratio. So not all towns are at that. Some are right on, some are higher, some are lower. In Milford's case, you're under your target based on how many 8th graders you have. By a lot. You'd probably come up another 70 or 80 seats, right? So I looked at all of those. Milford's probably the most extreme, imbalance. I said, we can't do that. Even Milford, wanting more kids, Al's not going to like me if I come to Finance Committee next year and say, good news, Al. Even if we took it.
you're going to pay less, but we cut kids.
No, the other way. You're going up.
Oh.
You're going up. But even Milford would say, whoa, can we do this gradually? It makes sense for everybody. So I said, well, what are the, also to stabilize it, did a 4-year rolling average of the 8th grade populations, and that evens it out. It's, pretty spiky. So 4-year rolling average of 8th grade population, set your foundation target. Next thing to look at is, well, what's the enrollment trend? How many has Milford been sending? And again, back it up, rolling 4-year average. Look at that trend, and then you look at the difference, right? So the trend versus the target, how far off are we? And then I basically, looked at it and said, well, if we can slow that down, everybody walks, not runs, towards their target, and we can do this over time. It's the right thing to do, the fairest thing to do for, I think of you in terms of finance committee, right? So, the folks who are trying to manage the budgets, but it's also the fairest thing to do to the schools who may or may have kids coming or going, and you don't want to flood them in either direction. So it's a way of basically pacing that out over time so that, again, we move slowly towards those targets. What that ultimately ends in is a number. So in this lottery, how many seats will Milford have? We're going to have 13 different lotteries, Al. Right, so you'll take all the Milford
Because
applicants.
BVT supports 13 different towns.
That's correct. So we'll have a Milford lottery. We'll fill to that number that we derived, and everybody gets ordered. So, if you're a math person out there, you're just ordering a set, right? So number of applicants, say there's 51 applicants, it'll randomly sort them with a unique identifier, 1 to 51. And then let's say the theoretical number is 36. We'll accept down to 36. Number 37 to 51 would be on the waiting list. Now, very well possible that number 27 says, no, I decline. So you go the next one. You go the next one. With this, and you go all 13 towns. What that will achieve, essentially, is a very transparent process, as random as it gets, right, in terms of what a lottery is, in that sense. But what it doesn't solve in the end is that we still have 750 applicants for 15 seats, right? And so that is the disappointing aspect in the end. The state has looked at this, and part of the argument or conversation we had for 10 years with the state was to say, look, whether you go the old system with the merit, categories, or you go the new system with the lottery, you have 9,000 to 11,000 kids a year in the state trying to get in that wind up on wait lists. That's a lot of kids, Al, that want to go to a career technical education and ultimately don't get that chance. So, we were advocating as a group, when I say we, MAVA, which is the Mass Association of Voc Administrators, that, lottery or merit, take your pick, but we need to add seats. We're not filling the demand. And the state's taking that very seriously. This year, just recently, they put out a request for proposals. They're putting up $100 million to expand vocational seats across the state. So it's about $60 million for schools like Valley Tech, if you can, within that grant, figure out how to add capacity. There's $20 million in there. I know in the feasibility of building the new Milford High School, the possibility of adding Chapter 74 programs might not be their best timing, where you guys are still kind of in that feasibility stage, but there'll be more rounds of this. But they're encouraging you to add some Chapter 74 programs. I'm encouraging you to add some Chapter 74 programs.
And that was going to be a question I had, is the new high school, we're just getting into feasibility.
Yes.
But one of the planks that we want to build it on is Chapter 74.
Absolutely.
In the past, there was always, well, you can't have plumbing, you can't have carpentry because BVT has it.
Yeah. So what the state had guidelines, even for us, by the way, if we wanted to open a new Chapter 74 program, there was a map. And so take, for example, vet assisting was one that we had looked at opening, and they would geographically map where the other ones were. The idea there wasn't to have duplicative programs, right? There's 49 Chapter 74 programs. We only have 18. There's a lot of room in the pool, Al, right? I couldn't encourage you enough to try to add programs to the new Milford High. I know you got the demand for it. The state may or may not be easing up on the duplicative programs. So is that, in this case, can Milford open a Chapter 74 program that Valley Tech already has? I don't know. In times past, the answer was no, but you got, 34 more to choose from.
I was going to say, but I thought the whole emphasis was, if we have 50 a year kids want to be carpenters, and Valley Tech can only take 20.
Yes.
we could have a program because we can focus on the 20 that can't get in.
You don't have to throw too much logic at me, Al. I mean, that sounds like it makes sense. I'm not opposed. I'm not even opposed to the duplication of programs. If we get the need, right, and it sure does seem like we do, like I said, there's plenty of room in the pool. And so, part of the approval process is that Valley Tech acts as a consultant of sorts and ultimately, endorses our sending schools starting the programs. I'm telling you, you have my endorsement. I think it's the greatest thing. No question at this point that Career Tech Ed is a successful, if not preferred, model for our youngsters. To go back on something, if I may, we talked about the kids at Valley Tech and how many were going to college and how many were going to work in the good old days when everybody could go straight to work and that was successful for a time. It was about I'm going to say 1998. And the pivotal decision here in Massachusetts was whether or not Voc schools, those students, were going to have to pass MCAS or not to get a diploma. And there was a pretty significant debate over that. They were thinking about doing a different type of exam for Voc students, and the fear was you'd create a two-tier education system, all that business. And ultimately, obviously, they decided, no, they have to pass the same academic standard as a comprehensive school. That was a big fork in the road, right? That ultimately set the path. But I don't think a lot of people really even know that story or why or what the logic was. That wasn't a Valley Tech thing. That wasn't even a Massachusetts thing. That was a national decision that was made. And the reason it was made was because prior to that, even when I started in 97 at Valley Tech, I was an academic teacher. Academics were more like an elective, right? The kids were there for shop, and that's why they came. And I had to do a lot of convincing to tell my kids why they needed to know how to read and write well. So what had happened in, let's say, the 70s, 80s, and even heading into the 90s was that it was just that. The academics were not rigorous, right? They were trade schools, and those students were basically, by its design, training them for a trade. They're not going on to their education. It was never meant to be terminal, that you couldn't go on, but they certainly didn't have rigorous academics. The reason the nation did that was out of fear for the projections on the boomers retiring, right? Millions of them that were leaving, the highest levels of their trades. And the concept there was that if the vocational students had a strong academic foundation and their career technical skill, that it would catapult them, that they could, quickly attain skills, run up the ladder, and replace the boomers who were retiring in droves, right? So there was strategic for the nation. And what happened in that whole mix, let me just, before I go on, the other thing that was happening was that in the old model, without the rigorous academics, it worked for a period of time. But then what started happening was it was starting to become like a glass ceiling for vocational students. It almost ended Voc Tech Ed, because what was happening was those students didn't have much, academic foundation. They weren't able to ascend in there, or only able to ascend so far.
So the skills would take them so high, and then they didn't have the math and the background to...
Bingo. And if they wanted to go on to school, they couldn't, because you didn't prepare them to be able to go to school. So what we do at Valley Tech, we've always said, listen, it's not our business to try to persuade you, dissuade you, whatever. Our job is to open the doors. Right? If you want to go to work, we'll get you prepared for that. If you want to go to college, we'll get you prepared for that. And at that point, when you graduate, it's your life, right? You make good decisions. I hope we taught you that. Okay, but it was never our job or our imposition to try to push kids one way or the other. you see it play out naturally. Your carpentry, your construction kids, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, generally have great opportunities to go straight in the field. They usually do. You see your IT, information technology, computer science, engineering, biotech. Obviously, those kids, they can go to work directly. Some do. But you're going to quickly need the dental, like I told you, the health services. It's not going to be long before you're probably seeking some type of, additional credential. And so, that's kind of just a quick shot of, how I'd sum that up? There is no wrong kid for CTE. Whether they're trying to do the fast track up here, they're trying to go directly to work, the model works. And that's the spirit why I say good on you. If Milford
Well,
can,
if we look at a model, I won't hold BC against you, that other Jesuit school. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Because you didn't start out, from my understanding, as somebody who said, I want to be a superintendent of a school.
No, that was not on the radar. I'm actually a poster child for what not to do in career planning. I started, growing up, construction family business, doing, earthwork, utilities, paving, all those types of things, and I loved it. And I was with my father as much as I possibly could be. Summers, rather than go to the beach, I would go and work with him all summer long, even after school. So I grew up down the Cape, Al. And so back then, there wasn't many places in Falmouth or at the area you couldn't get to on a dirt bike. So, I'd ride the power lines, the railroad tracks, trails, whatever, but I'd even go after school and go to work with my father. Loved it. So, he was a man of impossible expectations, and so, I learned a lot working with him.
Aren't they all?
As they should be.
And thank God they do.
I learned a lot about, masonry, welding. We repaired all our own equipment. I learned how to run equipment, heavy equipment. Learned all about paving, etc. And basically, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed all of that. I did not enjoy sitting in a classroom. Made my eyes itch. And so as a result, I was not a good student. I wouldn't say I wasn't smart. My father's not formally educated, but he's one of the smartest guys I know. And I was very similar. Like, I was not a fan of going to school. Much rather play hooky and go, work with my father. My problem was my mother was a lifelong educator and an English teacher. And they'd call her every time I skipped school, so she knew before I even got home. It was terrible. So I was pretty set that that's what I was going to do. I was going to just, work in the family business and carry on with a career in that way. But mom wanted me to go to college in the worst way, right? And I was a C student, a terrible student by choice, because I didn't want to be there. And she was strong on me going to college. And if it wasn't going into construction, I had friends in the rubbish business, and that business looked really good too, right? So it was going to be one of those two. And she said, no, you're going to college, and she said, then you can drive a rubbish truck. So, it's a funny thing. It's kind of like what we're talking about with parents making a decision today. Should I send my kid to college, or can I send them directly to work? Am I going to make a mistake? There's like a fear factor almost to that. And so I obliged, and I went to the University of Miami as an English major and a pre-law. I think I chose pre-law because lawyers make a lot of money, right, Al? That was my career.
Well, that was it. Be a doctor or a lawyer, because you make a lot of money.
That was my career plan, right? Money, you need money, so how can I make a lot of money? I know, I'll be a lawyer. Sounds good. I'm good at this. I was good at pre-law in college. And so it wasn't until I graduated from...
And when you hit college, you stopped being that C student, didn't you?
Oh, no, I did very well in college. I was paying. If I wasn't paying out of pocket, then I was on the financial need list there. I was not well off.
But cum laude tag.
Oh,
Okay.
that came next. So I graduate from UM and everything ready for pre-law. I got into 3 law schools, and it wasn't until then that started asking some lawyers what their life was like. What's work like? Never shadowed, never did anything like that. And they're talking about clerking for 8 to 10 years, and oh my gosh, that sounds terrible. I don't want to do that. I was like, when am I going to get my Matlock moment?
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, sure, kid, right? So I decided I'm not going to go. I'm not going to do it. Not only was I going to go back to school, well, for law school, borrow more money, right? This is exactly what we were just talking about. But lose money because I'm not working. I'm paying for it, right? So I said, I want to do this. So what do? It's just like what a Voc kid would do. They fall back on their trade. And I went back to running equipment. I didn't go to law school. Moved to Boston. I was running equipment around Melrose, doing
Oh, that
Blackstone.
was the era of the big dig money.
That's right, 1996. The big dig comes along. They offer me, my mother says in this whole thing, well, why don't you teach? Oh my God, teach. So you'd be good at it. You're really good at English. You like working with kids. I think you might enjoy it like I did. And it was clear. She's one of those, she's a teacher's teacher, right? So I considered it, and I put in one application to Boston College, your favorite other school, right, for their teaching program. And I went to work in Boston running equipment, 21 years old, making tons of money, having a good time. And 2 things happened in 96. The big dig starts, and they offer me my Local 4 book, which was unobtainable back then, for even more money.
Didn't you have to have your father die or something?
Yeah, it was a legacy deal, right? Like you couldn't get a Local 4 book unless your father died, he got his book, right? So here they are offering me, the unobtainable Local 4 book, invitation to the union, and tons of overtime. I think with the overtime, we're talking like 85, 90 grand a year. It was
Back then.
I was 21 years old in 1996.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine, right? And at the same time, I got accepted to Boston College, which I didn't expect to get in. And so I had to make a decision. And so I decided, well, I might not ever get a Local 4 book again. In fact, I probably won't. But I'll keep my licenses. I still have them in my pocket. I have my, 2A1C, and I have my Class A CEL. And I still drive and I still run equipment. I said I can always go back if this education thing doesn't work out. And then I thought, if I'm going to go into teaching, I want to teach at a Voc school because I get those kids. I was one of those kids. I didn't really like school. I like working with my hands. I like doing the.
Well, you're kind of stuck now that if somebody said, what's the next steps up the ladder? And you're sitting there saying, I'm at the top of the ladder now.
Yeah, honestly, Al, if I retired, I'd probably drive truck or run dozer. I love it. I still do it. I still do it once in a while. I move equipment and run trailer dump and, run dozer. I love it.
So the kid who didn't want to go to school
My friends
becomes the
don't
superintendent.
understand. They don't understand. It's one of those, how did that happen kind of things. They can't believe it. So I get to Valley Tech, right, and I completely understand these kids, right? They don't want to be in the classroom. They came there for the shop. I got the same kids in my class going, Mr. Steele, I don't need to know how to write. I don't need to know how to read. I'm going to be a whatever, right? But I knew better. And so I said, oh, really? This one kid, he's, what shop? Auto body. I said, okay, come on here. Take him out. Look at my car. I drove a beat-up 84 S10. And I said, I want you to paint my car. I said, but you don't get the job unless you do me an estimate. Give me an estimate. Write up a good estimate for me, and I'll consider giving you the job. It was a fictitious job, but he writes it up. And I said, great. Now, if you want to get paid, you have to write me a good bill. right? And I did it with all my kids, no matter what their trade was. We read everything. We read trade articles, you know, but you put the Shakespeare down. They weren't going to read that. They pretend to read it, but they wouldn't read it. And you know, I taught them very practical, you know, reading and writing, because I knew what they needed to know. There was an authenticity to it. So I actually really loved it. You know, it was, and guess what? I still got the licenses in my pocket, but I didn't need them. I'm still there, 29 years later. It's been a fantastic journey. I've loved working with the
Well,
kids.
now,
you know.
here's the situation. I'm an eighth grader,
Yes.
and I got to make a decision. Do I apply to Milford High, which I automatically get in?
Mm-hmm.
Do I apply to BVT, St. Peter, Paul, and Mary, you know, different schools? And somebody says, why should I go to either one of those? What criteria should I use to make my decision? Because if I go to BVT, if I go to Milford High, if I apply myself, I'm going to do well.
Sure.
But I'm an eighth grader. How do I know which one to pick?
I've always posed that to the parents at orientation. I said, please raise your hand if you knew what you wanted to be when you were 13, 14 years old. Not many hands. And look at me.
Those the ones that raise their hands, you could say, and half of you are liars.
Yeah. Well, I always tell them, you know, I'm 52. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, right? But not a lot of kids have that clarity or even thought that far ahead, right? Some of them do, right? I mean, especially some of the kids that come over that say, you know, my great-grandpappy was a plumber, my granddaddy was a plumber, my poppy's a plumber, and I'm going to be a plumber. You're in the right place, kid. Come on in, you know. But not a lot of people in life can say that they, you know, ran a linear line from, you know, what they wanted to do or what they wanted to be when they were a young kid. And that's the journey, right? I always say, you know, at that orientation there, I said, you know, I wanted to be, you know, an astronaut or a fireman. I wasn't sure which when I was, you know, 6 years old. I slowly figured out I wasn't that good at math, so there went the astronaut thing, you know, and that's what we do. We discover along the way what we're good at, not good at, what we like, don't like.
But how does that eighth grader decide? You got 4 doors in front, well, there's more, but at least 4 doors in front of you. Which door do I want to go through?
Well, I think, there's probably, hopefully that youngster has someone in their life giving them a little guidance and maybe having those kind of conversations with them. You know, you don't have to know what to do, but if you can ask some good questions and think things through, you know, introspectively, you might get a clear answer to that. You know, I'll give you another example. Years back, had a lovely gal apply to Valley Tech. She, you know, great student and everything, but in the interview she said, you know, I want to be a concert pianist. I thought, well, that's fantastic, but we don't have a piano shop.
Right? We don't have a piano.
Yeah, piano's out of tune, and so, you know, it really wasn't the right place for her. She didn't come, so she shouldn't have, right? It's just
Should the parents consider reaching out to the heads of, like, Craig Consigli at Milford High and you know, Dr. Steele at BVT to go and say, my kid is this kind of kid. Does he or she fit in?
So, you know, as I think I said it to you a little while ago, but there is no wrong kid for Valley Tech, right? And the way we look at it, I don't care who comes over. We're going to take them as far as we can from A to B, whatever their aspirations are. You know, that's our commitment. So I don't think anybody's going to make the wrong choice if they went to Milford High or they went to BVT or Peter Marion, whatever, right? I don't think it's that dire critical at that point. But one of the things that we're doing, per the new state guidelines, is down at the 8th grade level, the students have, I should say, there's some frameworks or some guidelines in place now with what the middle schools do with the kids around career awareness. So they're starting with the youngsters much younger, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, to help them think some of those things through prior to the 8th grade. And in that, they have, exposures to different things. So, you know, information about what they could get at Valley Tech, information about what programs are available at Milford High, and so forth. So there's a much more, it's called MyCap, My Career Action Plan. And so, the youngsters are getting a much more concerted effort in trying to help them think about those choices earlier than ever before. So that's a good thing.
Now, you mentioned that you have a target. You say Milford should have 20 kids.
Yep.
Whatever the number.
Yeah.
Are there other towns around that don't take up all their slots?
No. Valley Tech, I mentioned to you, between Valley Tech and Essex Aggie, we have the biggest waiting list in the state. It's the best, worst compliment you can have, right? It's terrible. I wish they all could come, right? But our capacity is our capacity. So,
but a town like Smallville
no town
would always use up their allotment?
Yes. Yeah. More than double it.
Well, I'm just saying it's not like the biggest towns have extra kids and the Smallvilles of the world don't.
No, it's all pretty proportionate, actually. Now, I do a lot of work with our sister schools, so I'm well aware that we're not unique, but we're definitely at one end of the spectrum here. For example, I think Tri-County building a brand new school, beautiful school. I just went over the topping off ceremony.
Better be for what they paid for.
So I think they have 3 out of their 5 towns have waiting lists. A few don't, right? So that's probably a more typical scenario, but that's not our reality, unfortunately. So, look, we can only get so big, Al. We're 26 acres. We're pot bound, like you wouldn't believe.
You can't sneak over next to Nipmuc.
Well, we've attempted to purchase a slice of the cemetery, the unused portion.
I was going to say.
But, no, I mean, you look at the costs of these building projects. You're right in it right now with feasibility with the new Milford High. Tri-County was over 300 million, right? Lordy, that's tough to do.
It's amazing,
right?
Because when I grew up and you talked 300 million, you could have bought Milford.
Yeah, right.
And they would have thrown in Hopedale and maybe part of Mendon.
Right. No, it's incredible, and even just a small expansion is huge money. Now the state, like I told you, they're throwing up $100 million, so they're serious about trying to get those 11,000 kids a seat somewhere.
But would you expand? Excuse me. Would you expand in your mind by expanding the programs you have, or adding more?
No, the plan would be to expand programs we have, right? So you look at a few aspects of that. One, what is the interest in it? So I can tell you right off the top, the hottest ones. Plumbing, electrical, HVAC, right? A lot of first choicers that don't wind up getting that job because of capacity.
What a surprise. Let's see, if I own a house, where do I spend most of my money? Plumbing, electric?
Yeah, right. Health services is way up there, right? And again, great opportunity. On the other end of that, you look at, where's the placement opportunity? Well, those 4 trades right there, health services, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, there's jobs for days, right? So you got the interest from the students on one side, you got the job opportunity on the other side. It's also, these are some of the trades that we're talking about. You have a great direct-to-work pathway that's lucrative, that you can climb, the ladder in that without going on to school.
Has biotech been considered?
Oh, we have it.
Oh.
Yes, we opened biotech. Boy, time flies here, but I'm going to probably say 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And that has, a huge employment opportunity, particularly for the Worcester region. It's big. I was
going to say, when I was looking to hire, those jobs, you always thought, well, if you're a doctor, lawyer, you're making the big bucks. But you turn around and say, if the return on investment sometimes is surprising, because It's $50,000-$60,000 starting salary.
Oh, yeah.
And
As a lab tech.
as
Yeah.
a lab tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't have $200,000 worth of debt to pay off.
There's a lot of graduates out there making more than us, Al.
Oh,
That's a good thing. Right?
That is a very good thing.
But yeah, here's another way we're increasing access that we haven't talked about. So last year we pursued a grant for what's called CTI, Career Tech Initiative, secured $1,040,000 to start adult programs in the evening. So we're doing 5 this year. That would be electrical, plumbing, HVAC, welding, and machining. Those are the first 5 we're going to do, plus a bunch of community enrichment things. Hoisting 2A1C license, it's a smaller course. Those first 5 I mentioned, those are 200-hour courses, minimum of 3 industry-recognized credentials, right? If you make less than $57,000 a year, the state will pay for it for you as a grant or as a,
Scholarship.
basically a scholarship, yeah. And the school obviously benefits tremendously from this. So this is a revenue generator for the school. We're going to run the school 2 shifts, so we're going to run at night. In addition to those, credentialed programs, we're also going to run a bunch of community engagement or community enrichment programs, things like hoisting licenses and things like that. And that's the start, and we hope to keep adding to it. So it's a win-win-win situation. You got, an opportunity to increase access to CTE. You might have missed it as a 9th through 12th grader, but anybody in the community who wants to upskill or retrain, start a new career, here's a chance, right? So it's generally, or I'd say likely, in other settings, it's been underserved populations. It's been people in economic hardship, things like that. So great opportunity that way, and then it also provides a great resource to the school. Hopefully, we can lower the budget.
That's always nice.
Yeah, that's a major goal of mine.
I know there was always the worry that as the Fitzpatrick era came to a close, what would the Steele era be? But after talking to you, I think we're in good hands, and the Steele era will continue to thrive.
I appreciate that. I certainly have been around long enough, and on the tour with Michael, doing FinComs and town meetings and so forth. I recognize that the towns...
I'll close with saying I don't envy you. I have enough to get ready for 1 town meeting.
Yeah.
Getting ready for 13.
13's a tour. That's a tour. And then no sooner do you finish it, you start back up again and do it again.
Then you get the next...
Well, you do the town meetings after the FinCom tour, right? But no, the towns, they're struggling financially. And I want to try to do whatever we can to help with that. So,
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you for coming on.
it's been a great time. Maybe I'll be on again someday.
I look forward to an update in a year when you come on.
Thank you, sir.
And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, thank you for joining us. Again, we brought up an idea that if you're struggling with the decision, BVT, Milford High, or any other school, go talk to the guy in charge, the woman in charge. Ask the questions, because this is probably the biggest decision you'll make. And as always, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thank you.